Hello, everyone, to day 9 of All About That Place. And today we're thinking about archives, which is where records live, or most of them do anyway. Of course, the big thing in modern times is that so much of our documentation, particularly in Britain, where I'm based, is increasingly available online. But that really isn't the case. I think the National Archives, which is England and Wales' sort of main repository, has something about 5% of its documents online, and that's quite a high percentage for an archive. So while there's lots and lots of things that are available online, there are all sorts of other archives that are going to be available. Things like big national repositories, regional county level ones, your sort of county record office, as well as archives in your town, village. A parish that you might be studying might have a local, sort of a small local archive, for example. So archives come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and thematic archives as well, based around particular trades of companies and stuff like that. And of course, you don't have to visit an archive yourself, although it's a lot of fun. And there's something really, I think, quite electrifying about picking up a document that is, hundreds of years old, something that sometimes somebody that you're studying might have held themselves. But you can, of course, delegate the work to a friend, to people who are professional researchers who might go and visit the archive on your behalf. And of course, many archives have a lookup copying service as well. These last two options, paying a researcher or asking the archive to look something up, can quite often cost a fee. But of course, all in the name of good research. Liz, thinking about archives then, what sort of record offices, archives haven't I mentioned? And how do you go about approaching your archive visits?
I think you probably mentioned the main ones that I was thinking of, including the local village archives. Sometimes you can find some real gems in a village archive that you wouldn't necessarily find in a county archive or one of the main county archives, or even a city archive, perhaps, for those that are unitary authorities. But I think for me, what's helped me most is to plan my archive trip really carefully, and I sort of make a prioritized list. I always go with more on my list than I know I can look up, because the last thing I want to do is get there and think, oh, I know there's a load of stuff I'd like to look up, but I just, I haven't written it down. So make sure you've got a list. Photograph a lot of documents while you're there. You can, if you're like me and you're miles away from the ancestors or the village that you're studying, what I like to do is make a hit list of documents, photograph as many of those as I can, and then just sift through the images at my leisure at home. So for me, when I go to an archive, it's all about planning, finding out what they've got in advance. And also, I think if you need to contact an archive to clarify what they've got, it's always worth sending an email rather than making a phone call, because it gives them time to consider their reply and perhaps pass your query on to the person that's most likely to be able to answer that question. So you might get perhaps a fuller response if you email your query or any queries you might have, rather than telephoning, if time permits. But definitely planning is key, I think, when visiting an archive. And as you say, is you can always perhaps take advantage of random acts of genealogical kindness. Quite often people are willing to look things up, and there might be something that you're able to to look up for somebody else. So I'm a great believer in paying it forward, and I'm always quite happy to look things up if I go to an archive, and I've done many lookups for people, and I've been very lucky that people have done the same for me. So yes, but yeah, planning is my takeaway message. Find out what's there, find out what you need, and make a list in priority order. Work your way through it. Take lots of photographs, and always make sure, if you can, that you've got the slip or some way of identifying the photographs you've taken, so you know what document they relate to, because there's nothing worse than finding a fascinating document and not having a clue what it means. So those would be my top tips.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. Planning, be organised. Know what you're going to have in advance. Know where your photographs are, and any other records of what you've searched. Record what you have searched, even if it's a negative search, i.e., you haven't found anything. And talk to archivists is a very good one. Emailing is excellent because it does give them time to consider, and it gives a written record. one of the things I think important to remember is that archivists are paid. That is their job by and large, unless it's a small sort of volunteer community archive. So especially for the bigger archives, you know, it's their job to help you, and they're experts, and they've done lots and lots of training and lots of experience, and they've got qualifications, and they know the material much better than you would. So let them help you, and they're usually only too happy to assist. And at the risk of being slightly negative, although I mean this in the best possible way, we've got so much material in archives, you know, all around, and right the way up to the National Archives, right the way down to your small sort of village archive. A lot of things haven't been catalogued. You know, we don't necessarily know where things are and what is there and what isn't. So sometimes the archivist will know, even if something doesn't come up on, say, an online catalogue, then don't be afraid to ask, because quite often it might be that it's stored somewhere else, or it just hasn't been fully catalogued. So don't always trust the computer. Make sure that you check with a real human before you decide that something doesn't exist.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Joe. And one of the archives that I always forget about using as well is business archives. I think moving to where I live now, which is Nish Street, which is the home of Clark's, and I recently learned about their archive, and I think that's something that sometimes gets forgotten about, actually. So your task sheet today is really just a space for you to go and record your findings when you're looking at these archive catalogues, and there'll be lots of talks today from archives to help you complete that task. And we'll be back tomorrow to walk you through your day 10, our last day. Oh, sad. It's come around so quick. And we'll be there to talk you through day 10's task tomorrow.